Hopefully, we are live law self-defense show from Las Vegas. Let's see how the internet is doing from my hotel room here. Make sure this is going live over YouTube. I don't see it yet. And there we go. Awesome. It's working. All right, folks. Good morning. Good morning. Glad you can join me here from Vegas. I don't know if you can see behind me. That's the golden smear is the Trump Tower back there. Staying here in lovely hot Las Vegas as part of my ongoing motorcycle trip. It was a beautiful ride so far. We went from I went from Denver to Durango, overnighted there. From Durango to Bryce Canyon in Utah, which was beautiful, and then from Bryce Canyon yesterday to Vegas, which was also beautiful, except for the last couple of hours, which hit 112 degrees Fahrenheit on the motorcycle, which when you're wearing all the gear I wear was a bit steamy, I guess is one way to put it. But I arrived safely, had a nice dunk in the pool, dinner with friends, and after we finish this broadcast, I'll be getting back to those friends for our little get-together here in Vegas. But the topic I wanted to talk about with all of you today is a news story that was, again, brought to my attention. So this is an event that I've written about in the past. It involves a police shooting, of course, a white officer and a black suspect, which is the only reason this is getting any media coverage at all. And when I first wrote about this, sometime in mid-April, we knew the identity of the suspect who'd been shot and killed by the officer. The suspect is Patrick Lyola. He was 26 years old, black male, violently resisting lawful arrest. The police officer's name at that time had not been revealed, but now we know him to be Grand Rapids, Michigan officer Christopher Schurr. And the reason this is back in the news is that Officer Schurr has been charged with murder now in the shooting death of Patrick Lyola. And we can see from the media coverage that the propaganda machine has gone into full effect. So I'm going to share with you the Fox News story, right? Purportedly the right-wing media. This is the Fox News coverage of this shooting event. Unfortunately, you're going to get to enjoy a lot of ads when I pull this up because Fox won't let me view their news article without allowing for ads. Sorry about that. I'll do what I can to minimize that by manipulating the window here. Let's see if that works. A little bit. All right, so I'm going to share that news story with you, and that'll put us in kind of the right frame of this event. So what we have here is Patrick Lyola was lawfully pulled over by the police. His license plate number did not match the vehicle he was driving. When pulled over, he ultimately gets out of his car, attempts to flee. The officer attempts to stop him. A violent confrontation occurs in which Patrick Lyola manages to seize control of the officer's taser, refuses to relinquish control. Sorry, folks, it's a little early here. And ultimately, the officer will shoot and kill him with a single gunshot. So let me see if I can pull this up. Okay. All right, folks, sorry, I'm using a new computer. It wants me to change some kind of setting here. Whoops. Nothing but the most professional. Well, it's not going to let me do this without restarting my computer or restarting my browser. See if I can share it anyway. Unbelievable. Well, perhaps I'll have to follow up later today with the broadcast I wanted to do with all of you today. What I will share with you is just read portions of this Fox News report, I guess, since I can't pull it up on the screen. The headline here is Michigan police officer charged with murder in Patrick Lyoya shooting. And the subheadline is Patrick Lyoya was on the ground when he was shot in the head by Grand Rapids Officer Christopher Schurr. Now, this is a way of presenting factual information in an incomplete manner to make it as incendiary as possible. Is it true that Patrick Lyoya was on the ground? Yes. The fight that he initiated with Officer Schurr went to the ground. The two men were fighting on the ground. They were both on the ground. But this subheadline would suggest to you that Officer Schurr was standing over Patrick Lyoya, who was laying helplessly on the ground when Officer Schurr shot him in the head. That's not what happened, folks. Patrick Lyoya was violently resisting lawful arrest, had seized control of the officer's taser, refused to relinquish control while they were fighting on the ground, putting the officer in a position where he couldn't simply leave Lyoya in control of his taser, a weapon capable of disabling the officer, leaving him vulnerable to having his own firearm seized. There was a gun in the fight, right? It was the officer's gun, which his department requires him to have on his person when on duty. It's not an option for him not to have the gun. There's a gun in the fight. It's on the officer's hip. And if he becomes disabled, Patrick Lyoya is in a position to further his aggression against the officer using the gun. Many, many police are shot and killed with their own weapons when it's seized by a violent criminal. And make no mistake, Patrick Lyoya was being a violent criminal. He was violently resisting lawful arrest, seizing the officer's weapons from him. But you wouldn't know this from this headline. From this headline, you would think this was an execution of a black suspect by a white police officer standing over him. So when we get to the news story itself, the first paragraph, a Michigan police officer who fatally shot a black man in the back of the head as he was on the ground during a traffic stop was charged Thursday with murder. Again, they present it as if it were a cold-blooded execution of a black man by a white police officer standing over him while the black man's on the ground helpless. Not at all what happened. Why did they present it in this way, do you think? You think there's an agenda here? You think there's propaganda being crafted? Next paragraph. Grand Rapids Officer Christopher Schurr faces a second-degree murder charge in the April 4th killing of 26-year-old Patrick Lyoya. It's Lyoya, folks. Sorry, I'm not sure how to pronounce that. The shooting was recorded by a bystander as well as by the officer's body cam, which I had also hoped to share with you. Unfortunately, I can't share the screen until I restart my browser. Thank you, Apple. That's very helpful. The officer, of course, once charged, turned himself in and is slated to appear in court. Guess who didn't fight the judicial process? The suspect did, violently. The officer complies with the judicial process. Prosecutor Chris Becker, who's bringing the second-degree murder charge against the officer, is quoted as saying, the death was not justified or excused by self-defense. Well, I would disagree for reasons I'll explain in a moment. By the way, now it's been 2 months. There's no new information in the last 2 months. Why did Becker wait 2 months to charge murder if it's so apparently not justified or excused by self-defense? Because did it take that much time for the political propaganda machine to spool up? The article continues. The shooting began when Schurr, who is white, that's with a capital W, I don't know why, pulled Leola over because his license plate did not match the vehicle. That's a perfectly lawful traffic stop, folks. About a minute into the stop, Leola began running when he was asked to provide his driver's license. So he apparently doesn't have a driver's license. Maybe he's got paper on him. This is what the officer's thinking when a normal, what ought to be a normal traffic stop, suddenly turns into the driver fleeing the scene. The police officer quickly caught up to him, and both men struggled on the ground. This is the first indication that both men were on the ground in this article. Up to now, you would have believed that the officer was standing over the suspect, firing an execution bullet into his brain as he lay helpless on the ground. The article continues. Officer Schurr fired the fatal shot while Leola was on the ground, demanding that the 26-year-old refugee from Congo let go of the officer's taser. They put let go in quotes. I don't know why, but clearly now, finally, how many paragraphs in? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 paragraphs into what's about a 10-paragraph story. So buried in the middle of this news article is the first time we find out that this violently non-compliant suspect had seized control of the officer's taser. The prosecutor said he consulted experts from outside Michigan about the use of force in the case. The officer, a 7-year veteran of the police force, has not publicly commented on the deadly incident. Well, of course he hasn't. They've charged him with second-degree murder. And I wonder who this prosecutor Becker consulted from outside Michigan. Could it be the academic use of force expert from the Rittenhouse trial? Remember that slimy little guy? Was a cop for like 6 hours? And now he's on demand for any use of force expertise needed by a prosecutor who wants to railroad a police officer. I forget that guy's name, but I will look it up, and I bet it's him. There's no amount of force that an officer can use that would be lawful in that quote-unquote expert's view. After all, he could just let the criminal run away, is how he's testified at trials before. How he testified in the Kim Potter trial. Oh, she could have just let him run away. That's an interesting view of law enforcement. We'll see if it's the expert I suspect it was. Then the article continues. Across the state in Detroit, the suspect's father watched the televised announcement of the charges with his lawyer, Ben Johnson, and said he was pleased with the decision. We strongly believe there was no justice in America until today. What I want is the final justice for my son. Some might argue that the son received his final justice when he initiated a violent confrontation with law enforcement, seized the officer's weapons, and refused to give up that disabling weapon, to the point where the officer was obliged to escalate his use of force for the safety of himself and the public. Fox News has reached out to the Leola family attorney. There's no quote from the attorney here, but I assure you, if Fox News gets in touch with Attorney Ben Johnson will be happy to spend as much time in front of the camera as anyone could possibly hope for. The officer's personnel file shows no complaints of excessive force, but much praise for traffic stops and foot chases that led to arrests and the seizure of guns and drugs. So this officer did exactly what he had been praised for his entire career. Never had a complaint of excessive force against him until he ran into this suspect. The article continues. Black community activists weeks ago, had accused prosecutor Becker, a Republican, of being too close to police and urged him to give the case to the Michigan Attorney General, a Democrat, to avoid even the appearance of a conflict. But the prosecutor declined. Well, he could decline because he was going to bring charges himself anyway. If there's anything more blatant than this as a politically motivated prosecution, hey, take it from one political party, give it to another political party because they'll do what we want. They'll charge this officer. I can't imagine what that would be. The article continues. The shooting turned into an immediate crisis for Police Chief Eric Winstrom, who was a commander in Chicago before taking charge in Grand Rapids early in March. Over prosecutor Becker's objection, he released video of the encounter from 4 different sources on April 13th. I have that video and wanted to, that news conference video, which includes the officer's body cam video and his, and video taken by bystanders on cell phones. But it's consistent with what I'm sharing with you here. Unfortunately, I can't share it at the moment because of computer drama. But it shows the traffic stop. It shows the suspect attempting to flee. It shows the cops' pursuit, the suspect turning violent, resisting lawful arrest, the fight going to the ground, the officer deploying his taser just before the fight goes to the ground. The taser is not effectively deployed. As usual, I mean, people think these tasers are magic. They're not magic, folks. Not effectively deployed. The suspect gets his hand on the quote-unquote barrel of the taser, which gives him far more leverage than the officer has on the pistol grip of the taser. The officer loses control of the taser. Now, here's the key issue. In this matter, many of us were routinely taught that tasers, OC spray, constitute non-deadly force. These are less than lethal weapons. So you might think, what if the suspect only has a less than lethal weapon? How could the officer be justified in shooting the suspect? What about the element of proportionality, Andrew? You're only supposed to use deadly force in self-defense when you're facing a deadly force threat. A taser's not a deadly force threat, right? Wrong. Whether or not a taser is a deadly force threat depends on the manner of its use. We routinely refer to tasers as non-deadly force because in their routine use, their lawful use by police officers, they are non-deadly force. They're only being used in a non-deadly force manner and being used lawfully. The same weapon being used unlawfully is more than capable of inflicting death or serious bodily injury or facilitating the infliction of death or serious bodily injury. So there's a difference between a taser being used lawfully by an officer on a suspect to compel compliance with a lawful arrest, because we know once the suspect's violent resistance has been neutralized, that officer is not going to continue using force on the suspect. If he does, he's committing a crime. But that's not what happens. The officer, in seeking to make the lawful arrest, is seeking to compel compliance with the lawful arrest. And once compliance has been achieved, either voluntarily by the suspect or the suspect being compelled to comply by being disabled by, for example, a taser, the use of force by the officer stops. That's not true when a taser is being used in an unlawful manner. If a taser is being used in an unlawful manner, say by a kidnapper to disable their victim to facilitate the kidnapping, or by a bank robber to taser the bank staff to facilitate the bank robbery, then they are causing serious bodily injury. They're disabling those people without lawful purpose. And that's deadly force. Remember, deadly force doesn't have to cause death. It has to cause death or serious bodily injury. Disabling injury for the purpose of facilitating further felony conduct against that victim is an infliction of deadly force. It's much like handcuffing. When a police officer handcuffs a suspect in the course of a lawful arrest, that handcuffing is lawful. If a kidnapper handcuffs their victim to facilitate the kidnapping, that's not a lawful handcuffing. The item is the same. The act of placing the handcuffs on the wrists is the same, but they're not the same conduct because they're not being done in the same manner for the same purpose. So when an officer is fighting with a violently resisting suspect and that suspect seizes control of the officer's taser and refuses to give up control of that taser, the officer can only presume that he's going to be the victim of his own taser, that he will be disabled by that weapon, by a violent criminal. And the officer can only infer that the violence will not stop then. If this suspect did not want to be violent, they would not be violently resisting lawful arrest. So the moment the suspect has control, the taser refuses to give it up, that officer is facing a deadly force threat from that suspect. And the only other tool that officer had to compel compliance in that circumstances was his service pistol. And he repeatedly orders the suspect to release control of the taser. The suspect says 1,000 times, okay, 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 but never complies with the direction. And there's a limit to how much time an officer can spend wrestling with a very large, powerful suspect on the ground before he's lost control completely of that taser, is the victim of that taser, is disabled and helpless against the further unlawful violent aggression of that suspect. So that's what actually happened in this case. And this prosecutor in Michigan has now decided to charge this police officer with second-degree murder, which on the facts as known to me and the video that I've seen is another example of an outrageous, politically motivated, wrongful charging of an officer with criminal charges for something that, by all appearances, was completely lawful and compelled on him by the suspect. So that's what I wanted to share with all of you this morning. Let me take a quick look through the chat and see what we have. Obviously, I'm traveling, so I don't have my normal setup here. Let's see. I should do this the Nick Ricada way and pull up my super chats. Let's see if there are any super chats. And if not, I'm going to have to run to. By the way, folks, if you're not subscribed, I'm about 400 people away from hitting 40,000 subscribers on YouTube. So if you're not subscribed, if you could take a moment to smash that subscribe button, hit the like, thumbs up. When you smash the subscribe button, hit that bell to make sure you get notifications. That would be greatly appreciated. Let's see if I can pull this up. Super chats. Well, see all. Let's see. Here we go. Just one. Restless Medic. $20 super chat. Thank you very much, Restless Medic. He writes, Andrew, as someone who carries anytime I'm outside my house, I want to thank you for your book and the Florida DVD that came with it. I feel more confident knowing what is in the book while carrying. Well, that's very kind of you. Folks, if you don't know, we do have state-specific courses for each of the 50 states. You can get the self-defense law for your state explained in plain English at, I believe it's, let me make sure I have the URL correct. Oh, come on, hotel internet. Actually, it looks like they may be. It looks like we accidentally left it on sale. So our state-specific courses are about 35% off at the moment. If you'd like to pick up the state-specific course for your state at a substantial discount, you can do that at lawofselfdefense.com/state. We do have that for all 50 states. So pick up the states that are of interest to you. So thank you very much, Restless Medic. I really appreciate that. Now, I should say, folks, the self-defense law of the 50 states is pretty consistent. It's about 80% the same. That's why we have our Law of Self-Defense Advanced course that covers the 5 principles of self-defense, and those 5 principles are pretty consistently applied across the 50 states. But that 20% variance from state to state does, of course, matter. It can mean the difference between a conviction and an acquittal, which is why we structured our courses as those 2-part constructs. So the full day, 8 to 10 hours of Law of Self-Defense Advanced class, the non-state specific content, that's the same across the 50 states. You can get that at lawofselfdefense.com/advanced. And then we supplement that with the 20% that's different for each state with the state-specific supplements at lawofselfdefense.com/state. All right, folks. I think that is the only super chat. And I am supposed to meet people for breakfast. Let me redo this page I was going to say real quick, but this hotel internet, despite having paid the premium, folks, okay. Oh, looks like maybe we do have a couple more. All right. A couple more super chats. Nathan, $5 super chat. Thank you very much. Writes, look at that road set up. Hot damn, Branca. Much love, brother. Mossberg in the saddlebag. Oh, he's talking about my motorcycle, I guess. So as you may know, I'm on a motorcycle trip. I left Denver a couple of days ago. Went through Durango, Colorado one night, where this time I was not assaulted by an old drunk lady. Which is good. Last time I stayed in Durango, believe it or not, I was physically battered by an old drunk lady in a Durango saloon. But this trip through Durango was uneventful. I'm glad to report. Then last night, not last night, the night before, I stayed in Bryce Canyon. rode yesterday from Bryce Canyon, Utah to Vegas. And the first 2/3 of that was just lovely high altitude mountain riding through Cedar Breaks, Bryce Canyon, of course, then Cedar Breaks, Zion National Park. It was all gorgeous. Once you get out of Zion, things get hot pretty quick. Then you're pretty much in open desert, and the temperatures actually went up to 112 degrees Fahrenheit, which when you're wearing a huge Aerostitch suit and the boots and the gloves and the full face helmet, and frankly, folks, once the temperature gets above 98 Fahrenheit, you really have to zip everything up. All the vents are closed, the visor stays closed, because you're just riding through superheated air, and the air is not cooling you. It's making you hotter because it's hotter than your body temperature. Every time I opened up my visor to get a drink of water, it was like someone had blow dryers in my face. It's superheated air coming right into the helmet. But it's fine. It was only for a couple of hours. I had plenty of ice water on the bike to drink, my little Camelback setup. And then once, of course, I got to my hotel here in Vegas, they had a lovely swimming pool, had a great dip and a nice ice cold beer. And that was wonderful. Tor Theo, euros, $2 euros. Thank you very much, Taurus. Right. Looks like tasers, once again, not deadly threats. Yes. So, of course, it appears that tasers qualify as deadly or not deadly, depending on the political needs of the person who wants charges brought. So when they want to charge the officer, it's a deadly weapon. In fact, we had a case, I believe it was out of Atlanta, where a number of police officers, and I didn't follow this case closely, but it appears to me that a number of officers were, in fact, overusing their tasers on a suspect in, frankly, a manner that looks akin to torture. They were charged with essentially aggravated battery, which is a deadly force degree of battery. And frankly, from what I know of the case, that seems like an appropriate charge. Again, whether or not a taser is deadly force or not deadly force depends on the manner of its use. And if they were using the weapon unlawfully, even as officers, well, that's an unlawful use of that force, causing serious bodily injury. Then a few months later, a police officer had a suspect, a drunk suspect, who'd passed out in his car in a fast food joint, drive-through lane, seized the officer's weapon, pointed the taser at the officer. The officer shot that suspect. And now suddenly the same prosecutor who before had characterized the taser as a deadly weapon said now the taser is not a deadly weapon. And therefore the officer was not justified in shooting the suspect because now that prosecutor was politically motivated to charge the officer. Now that prosecutor was unelected at the next election. He lost his position. There's a new prosecutor in place. I'll have to follow up and see what's going on with that case in Georgia. I believe it's still moving forward, however. Again, that was a white officer who shot a black suspect. And now in this case, we have a white officer shot a black suspect who seized control of his taser. And frankly, I don't know what prosecutors want officers to do here or what they expect officers to do moving forward. If an officer is supposed to believe that if a suspect takes their taser, they're simply supposed to allow the suspect to tase them with their own taser, disable them, that they're not allowed to escalate to their gun to defend themselves from that unlawful use of the taser, why would any officer carry a taser on them? Because if they lose control, they've lost their life. They have to presume. They're not allowed to escalate. They're not allowed to defend themselves against that taser, now in the hands of the suspect. Why would you carry a weapon on your belt that if the suspect takes it, you're not allowed to defend yourself against it? Absolutely, absolutely insane. But these are the political times we live in. Xanothium, 15, $5 super chat. Thank you very much. I won't presume your gender, sir or ma'am. Writes, love the analysis. Stay cool and stay hydrated out there. Yes, I'm in Vegas for a couple of days, today and tomorrow. And I think we'll be spending quite a bit of time by the pool and having the occasional adult beverage. So it should be a very relaxing couple of days. After that, I move on to Los Angeles, where I'm meeting up with friends. We'll see if I can share some of that with you. Some of them are, well, famous, I would say, more famous than me for sure. So they seem like they're famous people to me. But we'll see how comfortable they are with me sharing those meetups with all of you. I tend not to do that kind of thing, but we'll see. Maybe they'd be interested. So I'll spend a couple days in Los Angeles, and then from Los Angeles, I move on to the Hicksville Trailer Park, made famous by the Johnny Depp Amber Heard hearing, and I'll be staying at the trailer park where Depp and Heard had one of their infamous fights that was brought up at trial. So that should be great fun, and of course, I'll share photos of that. Don't know if I'll be able to live stream there. I'm not sure what the internet will be like at the trailer park. We'll have to see. But certainly, I ought to be able to post a picture if nothing else. All right, one last check on Super Chats, and then I do have to get ready to run to breakfast. All right, a couple more. Well, you people are wonderful. KHOR. Core? $5 super chat. Thank you very much. I read the Taser had 2 cartridges. Both were deployed. Does this hurt self-defense argument? I'm in Michigan. Don't forget the governor race against Whitmer. No, it wouldn't matter if the Taser had both cartridges deployed because it can still be used in what's called drive mode. It can be pressed into the body of the officer to disable the officer. That continues to be a capability even if the cartridges are exhausted. So the cartridges are required for use of the Taser as a projectile weapon if the 2 men were at distance from each other, but they weren't. They were in close contact on the ground, and there's no ready way for the officer to create distance from the suspect. I mean, if he could magically transform himself 20 feet away, perhaps he's no longer at risk from the Taser, but he can't do that. He's in close contact. He's on the ground with the suspect, fighting to attempt to achieve control of the Taser again. He's unsuccessful in doing that. And folks, you get tired pretty quick when you're wrestling with a big dude on the ground. You have a limited amount of energy and time to solve this problem. And at any moment, that suspect could turn that Taser in drive mode on the officer and disable the officer. Ben D, $5 super chat. Thank you very much, Ben. He writes, Andrew, I live in Massachusetts and applying for a LTC license. So for folks who don't know, that's a license to carry. That's the concealed carry permit you need in Massachusetts to lawfully carry a concealed firearm. And they come in a variety of flavors that change from time to time. He writes, I need to provide a reason, and police said all lawful reasons is not adequate. Any advice? Well, when I applied 30 years ago, I put down all lawful reasons. That's what we were recommended to do. But Massachusetts, for folks who don't know, it's a very odd concealed carry permit licensing scheme. So it's not a license issued by the state per se. It's issued by your local police chief, and every little town in Massachusetts has its own police department. It may be a police department of 3 officers, but it has its own police department. And that police chief is who issues your license. Now, the license is good in the entire state. So in that sense, it's a statewide license. But it's issued by whatever town you live in, that police chief in that town. Which means, as a practical matter, that the standards for issuing the permit vary enormously from town to town. Whether or not you get a concealed carry in Massachusetts is largely a function of what town you live in. I mean, I had a concealed carry license in Massachusetts the entire 25 years I lived there, but I was explicitly careful to make sure I only lived in towns where I knew the police chief would issue me a concealed carry permit. If I moved 5 miles further towards Boston, that police chief doesn't issue licenses. And I would have been completely out of luck. The same me, the same training, the same law-abiding nature, but in one town, I'm easily issued a concealed carry permit. The next town over, just not issued because it's a completely may issue discretionary issue regime. So in this particular case, Ben is writing that his police chief is saying all lawful reasons is not adequate for concealed carry permit. That suggests to me that your chief just doesn't want to issue the permit, that you're going to be denied. Sorry. And the closer you are to Boston, the more likely that is to be the case. Until you get out pretty much to the 495 Beltway, it's pretty sketchy whether or not they'll issue a concealed carry permit. Outside 495, you're usually in pretty good shape for concealed carry permit, assuming, of course, that you're good to go in terms of your background check. Between $495 and $128. It varies a lot by town. Inside $128, very difficult to get a concealed carry permit. If they won't allow all lawful reasons, I would put lawful defense of person and property. Self-defense. Of course, you're not allowed to use a gun for defense of property in Massachusetts, but frankly, the police don't know that themselves. Put self-defense. Okay, next, Nicky the Nose Ricada. I don't think this is actually Nick. That doesn't look like his avatar. But it's a very generous $20 super chat. Writes, Mr. Branca, thanks for all the great analysis on yours and Nick's channel. Question, looking to get my CC concealed carry, but I have a misdemeanor 15 years ago, alcohol-related charge. Will this prevent me from getting approved? Well, it shouldn't on a, I don't think it should, on like a Nick's background check. I don't think that's a normal misdemeanor that's not domestic violence related. Does not make you a prohibited person. Now, if you're in a may issue state and it's discretionary, then the police can use whatever they want. Really, a lot of jurisdictions won't issue you a concealed carry permit if you have any kind of drunk driving conviction, for example, because they figure if we can't trust you with a car, why would we trust you with a gun? I don't think that makes a lot of sense, but that's the kind of decision-making law enforcement often engages in when it comes to issuing civilians concealed carry permits. But as I always caution, my expertise is use of force law. When you're allowed to use force under what circumstances against another person. It's not gun law and it's not concealed carry law. I know as much gun law and concealed carry law as I need to know personally for my own purposes. But I don't claim any degree of great expertise in that. So the best thing you can do is actually talk to whoever the issuing authority is and find out what standards they're likely to apply. By the way, if the misdemeanor is for domestic violence related, that under federal law, you become a prohibited person for firearms, which I think is ridiculous, but that's the way it is. That's how the Republicans compromise on gun control, folks. And of course, that was applied retroactively to many, many men who had, for convenience sake, accepted misdemeanor domestic violence charges because it didn't really matter. There were no real legal consequences for it at the time they took that plea. It just made the legal process go away, basically, for them when they were having an argument with their spouse or significant other. And then the feds passed this lifetime prohibition on gun ownership for anyone with even a misdemeanor DV conviction, and all those guys lost their gun rights. Terrible. Not right. All right, another look. Let me refresh the super chats here. And thank you all for your generosity. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. This looks like one last one from Custom Torso. $5 super chat. Thank you very much. Custom asks, when are you going to the RV park from the Depp trial? Next week. What's today? I actually don't know what today is. Today's Friday, right? So around midweek next week is when I expect to be there. And when I'm there, I will take a photo of me in the trailer park at my little trailer and share that on Twitter and on Instagram. And if I have a sufficient internet connection, perhaps I'll do a live stream on my phone walking around the trailer park. That might be fun. All right, folks, I think that's all I have time for now. I have to get ready to go down to breakfast at this point and say goodbye to the Trump Tower behind me. Yeah, and for those wondering, I do bring a little portable studio with me. So I have a decent microphone. I have a couple lights, and unfortunately, I didn't get the computer set up properly, but for sharing purposes. But I'll take care of that as soon as I sign off here. And the next time we meet, perhaps later today, I'll share that video with all of you, or perhaps cover a different story entirely. All right, folks, remember, if you carry a gun so you're hard to convict, that's why I carry a gun, so hard to convict. Vegas. If you carry a gun, so you're hard to kill. That's why I carry a gun, so I'm hard to kill. My family is hard to kill, and you also owe it to yourself and your family to make sure you know the law, so you're hard to convict as well. Until later, perhaps later today. If not, then certainly by tomorrow. I hope to see you all again. Until then, I remain Attorney Andrew Branca for Law of Self-Defense. Stay safe.